their doctorate in nursing. This couple has served our community for years as crisis volunteers for both Phoenix and Glendale fire departments.
She has to be there. There's nobody to cover for her. She works in the
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the City of Phoenix Virtual Community Forum for the new Office of Accountability and Transparency. I'm Vielka Atherton, Communication Manager for Human Resources and your moderator for the evening. On behalf of the City of Phoenix, I'd like to thank those of you tuning in via WebEx this evening, and congratulations to all of you for being selected as finalists for the position of First Director of the Office of Accountability and Transparency. Before we get started, we want to remind everyone at home that Spanish translation is available if you are tuning in via WebEx. And for more on that, I'd like to introduce our translators for the evening, Mario Barajas and Elsie Duarte.
Good evening. My name is Mario Barajas, and I'm going to be serving as one of the Spanish interpreters, and I will be making an announcement to our Spanish residents now. Buenas noches, mi nombre es Mario Barajas, seré uno de los intérpretes que les va a estar interpretando hacia el español. Me gustaría tomar este momento para hacerles saber de que si desea escuchar en español este foro, puede visitar en el sitio web Phoenix.gov y luego hará clic en el aviso de alerta gris en la parte superior de la página. Nuevamente puede acudir al sitio web Phoenix.gov y haga clic en el aviso de alerta gris en la parte superior de la página. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. So tonight's event is an important part of the final stage of what has been a nationwide search for someone to lead the new Office of Accountability and Transparency. It gives our community members an opportunity to hear from our potential new director. The individual selected for this position will be the very first director of the office. A little about the Office of Accountability and Transparency. This was recently formed to monitor, actively participate in, and conduct investigations of possible misconduct by and resident complaints against sworn personnel of the Phoenix Police Department. The office will make recommendations to the police chief regarding possible disciplinary actions against sworn personnel and will make subsequent recommendations regarding policy and training issues. The director will be responsible for the development and implementation of the office and its policy, procedures, and programs. This will include hiring and building a team of professionals to carry out the responsibilities of the office as outlined in city ordinance. We received over 2,000 responses to a community survey that we sent out, and within that survey, we received many questions from the public. I will be asking a series of questions and for each of the questions, I will alternate the order in which the question is asked. Each finalist will have a maximum of 3 minutes to respond. At any time, you may ask to have a question repeated. Okay? All right, at this time, I'd like to introduce our finalists. First, we have Andrew Meyerberg, and Andrew is currently the director of the Seattle Office of Police Accountability. Also with us is Aaron Ellison. Aaron is currently the senior director of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Arizona State University. We also have Roger Smith. Roger serves the City of Cleveland as the administrator of the Office of Professional Standards. I'd like to welcome all of you, and at this time, I'd like to ask you to tell us a little bit more about yourself and your qualifications for this role. Andrew, may we begin with you?
Well, good afternoon, or good evening, I guess we are now. My name is Andrew Meyerberg. Again, I'm the director of Seattle's Office of Police Accountability. We are, and the way I always explain to people, we are the internal affairs department for the Seattle Police Department. I'm a civilian, I'm a lawyer. I've never been a police officer, but I've led the office for about 4.5 years. And we investigate all police misconduct, so all employees and all conduct. I'm passionate about the work. I love the job. And I'm incredibly excited for the opportunity to create something in Phoenix, and the opportunity is just massive here. So thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Andrew. Aaron?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Aaron Ellison. I've been with the Arizona State University for the past 7 years. I come to you with almost 20 years of experience conducting workplace investigations, including investigations involving police officers. Those complaints relate to issues of discrimination, harassment, sexual assault, inappropriate relationships, implicit bias, microaggressions, and so forth. I've also served in the United States Army JAG Corps Reserve Component for the past 10 years, where I oversee administrative investigations as a legal advisor or to conduct legal reviews of completed investigations. And so those investigations involve soldier misconduct, including sexual harassment, EO violations, discrimination, harassment, toxic leadership, ethics violations, property damage or loss, as well as violations or potential violations under our Uniform Code of Military Justice, which is our criminal code. And those are instances where civilian authorities or our own internal CID or criminal investigation division, for whatever reason, might turn down or decline to look into the matter. And so I certainly come to you with a large background as it relates to criminal laws and understanding of principles and frameworks and elements within that context. I would also add that I've, obviously as someone who's been doing investigative work for the past almost 20 years, I certainly have a knack for analytical skills and analyzing cases for merit, for dealing with complex cases, high-profile cases, heavy caseloads, certainly have a very strong writing ability as well, delivering messages to communities, to briefings, very senior level and executive leadership. Lastly, I would add that in addition to my criminal justice experience in the military, I also have a wide background or a very versed background with respect to national security law in the military, so understanding the principles of the law of armed conflict, the standing rules for use of force, rules of engagement, the principles of necessity, ensuring that the measures taken to defeat the threat are the appropriate measures, proportionality, ensuring that the force used is not excessive to the intended outcome, humanity with respect to ensuring that there is, that we minimize collateral damage and do not engage in unnecessary suffering, and then the concept of distinction, so identifying combatants versus non-combatants and military objects or targets versus protected entities. And with that background, I've served 3 short-term training missions overseas, as well as 2 domestic missions and 1 mobilization stateside in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. And Roger, same question.
Thank you. Appreciate it. After that, I worked as a prosecutor with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. And during that time, although we were not working directly with civilian oversight, we had many encounters with the issue. One of the cases that occurred during my time in the DA's office was the Amadou Diallo case. I don't know if some of you are old enough to remember that, but that was one of the cases when I started at the DA's office. After that, I worked as a trial attorney with the Department of Correction, basically conducting disciplinary trials against correction officers who were involved in misconduct. And then following that, beginning in 2007, I began working for the New York City Civilian Complaint Review Board. And there I trained investigators in search and seizure law, report writing, and interviewing techniques. In addition to that, I also worked with them on their reports, worked with them directly in their interviews, and supervised their progress through continuing development in the training program. And finally, after that, I came to Cleveland in 2018 and began directing as the administrator of the Office of Professional Standards. And there, I ran an organization that had 9 investigators, as well as additional support staff, and we were responsible for investigating acts of misconduct against the Cleveland Division of Police. So that is my qualifications and resume. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Once again, congratulations to each of you for making it to the final stage in our search for a new director. Let's get started with the questions from the public. Again, these questions are representative of the questions that we received as part of that community survey. Okay, so we're going to change up the order as we go through the questions. Andrew, since we began the last round of questions with you, we'll begin with you, Erin. Okay, question number 1 is a 3-part question. Why do you think you are the best person to serve in this position? What do you bring to this position? And why should the residents of the City of Phoenix believe you can deliver in this position?
Thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, I think one of the traits that makes me an ideal candidate for this position is my background on investigations, not only on the civilian side, but also involving service members within the military. I certainly have served in different capacities within those investigations. So as an investigator myself, as a director, a supervisor over other investigators and attorneys, as well as a legal advisor, legal reviewer, and in some cases we also provide legal opinions for our criminal investigations division within the Army as well. So I think that is certainly one component that makes me an ideal candidate for this position. Along with the other military experience that I have with respect to national security law and the law of armed conflict, rules of engagement, use of force. My leadership abilities, I think, is another trait that makes me an excellent candidate for this role. I've been in leadership for almost 10 years in my professional capacity and probably another 8 years very early on in my adulthood, working odd jobs here and there. So I definitely have led people and think I certainly lead them well. I think it's important to grow your team and give them the ability to develop in order for your departments to develop. And then I would say what I bring to the role and what residents or how they can trust that I can deliver is that, as I mentioned, I've handled very heavy caseloads. I've handled complex caseloads cases that certainly have been publicized. In many cases, I definitely have a knack for being objective, impartial, providing equitable treatment to both sides, as well as fairness, ensuring that individuals receive their due process throughout the investigation. I've also had a lot of training and experience conducting trauma-informed investigations, understanding that individuals experience trauma differently, and how they may recount that trauma could be perceived as inconsistent or does not follow sequential order. So I think when we have that background and that level of training, we can certainly recognize that they may not necessarily be making things up or fabricating it, but rather it's just how they are recounting what they experienced. I've done a lot of work with informal resolutions and alternative dispute resolutions, mediations when appropriate. I certainly have done a number of trainings. I probably have done well over 100 trainings in my experience.
Thank you, Erin. Roger, same question. And again, if at any point you want me to repeat it, just let me know.
Thank you. This position is the natural culmination of all my professional experience in this area. I began this work in civilian oversight, training and developing investigators, and working with them on the development of sound legal conclusions. I did that for close to 9 years, so I was able to go through multiple generations of investigators because we had a relatively rapid turnover rate. So I could see what kinds of things work in the process of building up a team of strong investigators. And then I went from that to a place where I was exercising all the responsibility, both the developmental and the administrative. And now the one thing that I have not done yet is to have the opportunity to start an agency, to be part of incorporating both of those processes at the very beginning of the development of the agency. So this is very much the result of my professional training and my life training to this point, because I was introduced to this issue of civilian oversight as a teenager when I began to get stopped multiple times in northern New Jersey, perhaps prompted by a growth spurt between my age of 12 and 14. The next thing, in terms of what I bring to the position, I bring not just my work experience and my training and my record of training others. I also bring an analytical mind. In my spare time, I play a lot of chess. I play tournament chess. Now, a chess game and a legal case are two fundamentally different things, but I think that there's an element of painstaking consideration that goes into both. And that painstaking consideration I will bring not just to the cases that we have, but to the relationships that we need to develop to make this agency successful. And then the last thing is, presenting this to the community very much involves talking to people who have experienced this issue in a way that was similar to the way I experienced it as a teenager. And so I'll be able to go out to the community as part of a team and to build a team that can answer these questions and be responsive to the community's needs for better information and for stronger representation in this area.
Thank you, Roger. Andrew, same question?
So I have extensive experience running an office very similar to OAT in Seattle, and I've experienced from from several different perspectives. Before I moved over to the Office of Police Accountability, I was an assistant city attorney, and in that role, I learned about police accountability from the community. And what I mean by that was one of the first jobs I had was I was the lawyer for the Seattle's Community Police Commission. And I moved to Seattle from New York. I knew nothing about Seattle, but I was learning. And by listening to these people that on their spare time, their second jobs was police accountability and was reforming systems, I learned a massive amount. And it really changed my perspective of policing and how to reform policing and whether reform was possible and how you would do it. The next thing I did after that was I moved to be the lead attorney on Seattle's consent decree. And I did that for 2 years and helped guide the city through its consent decree. And then I had the opportunity to go to OPA, the Office of Police Accountability, and I couldn't turn it down because for me it was the next way to effectuate change, whether through investigations or policy recommendations or being present. I had seen prior officer-involved shootings when OPA and the department wasn't there, just to be there, to talk to families, to apologize to families, to hear families. The opportunity was just a massive opportunity, and I had to take it. Over the last 4.5 years, I've taken an office that was a great office, and I've made it better. I've innovated, and the ways I've done it were focusing on what is our ideal state? What should we be doing? How do we reform the police? I've looked at policies. We've changed policies in virtually every area, whether it's from de-escalation to use of force to crowd management. We were able to, when we got hit with 20,000 complaints last summer about the protests, we were able to triage them. We were able to process them. We had 140 investigations. Our staff worked around the clock. We created innovative systems to be able to handle those. And keep in mind that in Seattle, unlike other jurisdictions, everything I do is publicly dissected. It's all online, right? And it's a very big interest, just like there's going to be in Phoenix, at looking at that work. And I don't think I shied away from the pressure. I think I and my office, we thrived. So I want to bring that to Phoenix and bring that same sense of passion for the work, passion for reform, innovation, making us a national model. That's what I want to bring. And I think, again, why I think I can deliver is just simply track record. I've been doing it for the last 4.5 years at an incredibly high level, and again, you all can look it up online. It's not a secret, and everything we do is out there. But I would love to bring that to Phoenix and take this city and accountability in the city to the next level, and again, make it something that everyone else in the country is looking at.
Thank you, Andrew. Question number 2, Roger. Tell me about a time when you had to gain trust with diverse community groups. Is there anything you would do differently? How do you propose to balance the concerns of all stakeholders on such critical issues without bias while disregarding social media and other pressures?
In June of 2018, when I first arrived in Cleveland, the Office of Professional Standards, just for context, 37 of the 327 points currently being evaluated under the consent decree in Cleveland deal directly with the Office of Professional Standards. Of those 37 points, the agency at the time I arrived was non-compliant in 13 of those areas. And so there was a challenge waiting for me in specifically being responsive to the areas where the agency was deemed to be non-compliant. In addition to that, the agency had received some adverse publicity, and the investigators, who were hardworking, good people, could feel that. And they could feel that somehow their work was being viewed in a negative, somewhat discouraging way because of that. In addition to all that, there were many people at the time who felt that they had made complaints to the Office of Professional Standards and that those complaints weren't drawing a sufficient response. Finally, there was the police department and the city, who basically shared the same view of the Office of Professional Standards that they had of the consent decree as a whole, which is it was a necessary evil in their lives. And so all of these people were part of the audience that had to draw a response from me when I arrived. And basically what I could do for those people was identify the specific areas that they may have had issues with, to which OPS could actually make a meaningful response. With the community, it was creating a better response to the cases. So we were able to do that by drawing down our investigative times, by supervising an agency that helped us to address the backlog of cases that the agency had. In addition to that, with the police, they needed to see some reliability from the standpoint of our interviews. They needed to understand that they weren't going to be interrogations, that they were, in fact, going to be interviews that respectfully asked them probing questions, but relevant questions about the allegations that they were dealing with. And in general, what it involved was managing the kinds of tension that come up when all people have different expectations of your agency. And so we manage those tensions by dealing with everybody fairly and responsibly and letting them know what they could expect from us.
Thank you, Roger. Andrew, same question.
So as mentioned a little bit earlier, one of the things that I saw when I first went to the Office of Police Accountability was there was a very high-profile fatal shooting that occurred, and there was a lot of anger in the community. And there just wasn't, I thought, a great response from the city, and I thought it was a mistake. Because even if I think cities are often worried about admitting fault or liability, but you don't have to admit fault or liability to say you're sorry, and that you understand what people are going through. So one thing we did early on was we tried to develop a program where what we would do is, if there was an officer-involved shooting, we would reach out to elders in the community, and we try to connect with the family, and to say to the family, well, if you want information, if you want to talk to us about what happened and what we know so far and what we're going to do, we're happy to meet with you. And in 2018, or 2019, I'm sorry, there was a fatal shooting of an American Samoan man in Seattle. And we were lucky to have a woman on our staff who was also American Samoan, and she had a contact to the community, so we set up a meeting. And I went into the meeting with the purpose of meeting with the family to say to them I was sorry, but to talk to them about what we would do, the investigation we were going to conduct, not to make promises because I couldn't make promises, but to talk them through, here are the steps we're going to take. And these people didn't know me from Adam. I mean, they trusted me because they knew someone that I worked with that they trusted, but they gave me a lot of trust to allow me in that room and to be with them in that time of pain. And I went in there and I met with them and I talked to them about it, and then what I said to them is I will do this investigation, and at the end, no matter what the result, I'm going to come back and I'm going to talk to you again. And it was hard. It was definitely, these were difficult conversations. But I think it was incredibly valuable, and it was a way to really connect with the community and to build that trust that even if they didn't like the outcome, that they still believe that I tried to do the investigation as fairly and objectively as I could. And I think maybe it increased trust in the system. What I would say is, generally for social media, as anyone in government knows, there's a lot of people with opinions on social media. And what I very much try to do is, are we doing the right thing? Right? Are we doing what we believe? Is it in line with our mission, our vision, and our values? If it is, all that's noise. It doesn't make a difference. And I really try to govern my office that way, to say we're not going to be swayed by strong opinions on either side. We're going to do what's right every day. And ultimately, that's the way to carry forward the work.
Thank you, Andrew. Erin, same question.
Thank you. I would say a time when I had to gain trust from diverse community groups certainly centered around a particular high-profile investigation that I managed. It was a very complex case, had a lot of moving parts. It was in the media as well as on social media, and balancing all of those moving parts in terms of the individuals we had to talk to, the community that the individual or the respondent in this case served, and quite a few emails or inquiries coming through our office as a result. And really it took the effort of, and then of course the community of the organization. So this is at ASU, trying to balance those three components and gaining the trust of these, not just witnesses to the investigation, but also the ASU community as a whole, and as well as the supporters of this individual. So it definitely was a complex investigation, which meant that we had to utilize all hands on deck because of just the nature and the breadth of work and the number of issues that came through with this particular case. One thing I think I would do differently was to look for more resources right out the bat, recognizing that along the way we were utilizing everyone for just this one case to the exclusion of others. So trying to find that healthy balance so that those particular cases didn't have to suffer, as well as the other work that we engaged in. And how do you propose to balance the concerns of all stakeholders and critical issues without bias while disregarding social media? So I would say that based on my background, my ability to be objective and impartial, I'm certainly one who promotes fairness and equitable treatment, giving individuals the tools and resources that they may need during a process, whatever those look like, is certainly something that's critical, and certainly something that I think would help in gaining trust or balancing concerns of stakeholders, but also listening intently, taking intentional effort, and using emotional intelligence to really hear from all individuals, all stakeholders, to see through their lens and really understand their perspectives in order to reach the best outcome. Most times people just want a platform to be heard, and so that is how I think, and then balancing the stress behind it, or disregarding the pressures. I think I'm a very resilient person, and I manage stress and high pressure environments very well. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Question number 3, this is a 3-part question. Andrew, if you get this position, what is your vision and your top priorities for this new office? After your first 6 months on the job, what results would you need to achieve to consider your first 6 months a success? What do you feel the community should look for as an indicator of your success in your new role?
So as far as my vision and priorities, I would say my vision fundamentally would be to create an office that fosters a culture of accountability within the city, within the Phoenix Police Department, and is simply to build trust between community and the police, and particularly our most disenfranchised communities. That is the vision, ultimately, I think, of this office and really any police accountability office, but specifically this office. For priorities, I think what I want to do first and foremost is to meet with stakeholders and community, and starting with, government, moving to community groups, community members, is I have to understand is does the vision of the people that fought so hard for this office, does that align with my vision? And how do we align them? And also to understand, what are people's expectations for police accountability, particularly for OAT? Because setting realistic expectations and being on the same page, I think, sets you up for success. So I'd want to meet with really anyone and everyone, and that's also police department, unions. These are all going to be players at the table, and I'd want to meet with them to understand what the challenges are and what the expectations are. After that point, I really would be focusing on building a mission, vision, and values for the department. What is it? Who are we? What are we? What are we going to do? And how are we going to do it? I'd then move to hiring. I have my thoughts about what I want the office to look like. When I look at the ordinance, I see audits, I see policy review and research, I see investigations, and I see community engagement. Right? Those are the 4 buckets that I see. So I want to hire for each of those. I want to hire my managers. I then want to bring in my investigators, my auditors, and my researchers, my policy analysts, the community engagement specialists I need to help me hit the ground running. I'm not from Phoenix. I need to have people who are from Phoenix to help guide that work. After that, it's all the internal processes. Do we have a manual? Do we have our internal training programs? What are our metrics for evaluating success? What I think I would focus on for success would be, obviously I want things up and running in 6 months. And I want to be able to start doing investigations in 6 months. And whether it's, every single case or high-profile cases that are identified by community, that would really be my focus in the first 6 months. But getting a robust investigation team up and running. But then again, doing a deep dive in what are the problems, what are the gaps, what are the policies that need to be changed. But evaluating that success, I think, would be a combination of things. It would be, did we hit that 6-month milestone for investigations? When we've circled back with our stakeholders and our community engagement folks and our community members, do they feel like we're operating correctly and in the right direction? Can we do surveys to gauge community confidence before and afterwards? And then obviously creating, again, internal analytical performance metrics is what I would want to do with a data specialist in-house. But I think that's how I would approach it in my first 6 months.
Thank you, Andrew. Erin?
Thank you. My vision would certainly be maintaining a high-functioning team with a reputation for fairness, quality services, efficiency, and transparency. I think off the bat, within the first 6 months, I would certainly start by building a team of skilled professionals, so to include investigators, senior investigators, intake specialists, triage specialists, community relations managers. Sometimes an assistant director can be effective in this type of position or this type of office as well, in addition to attorneys, and outside counsel. And sometimes attorneys make really good investigators as well. I think it's imperative to use a search committee that is diverse and reflective of this community, so certainly identifying individuals who would serve on that committee, outlining training plans for the team, education plans, not just to, when they come into the office, to understand policies and procedures as well as laws and regulations, but also continued learning throughout their employment. That's going to be certainly something that's imperative. Simultaneously, I think it's important to start building those relationships within the Phoenix community right away. So connecting with city personnel, mayor, the city manager and deputy city managers, HR, the Civilian Review Board, and other entities within the city, as well as the police department. So connecting with the chief of police, leadership within the police department, internal affairs, connecting with union reps as it relates to police officers who may be under investigation and understanding their processes in that context. And then, of course, with the community. So connecting with community leaders and organizations, identifying who the active individuals are within Phoenix who have been fully engaged, but also identifying organizations that may not be actively engaged, but certainly could be critical to the success of this department. And then thereafter, I think it would be beneficial to start creating the processes, so the investigative processes, the complaint processes, alternative dispute resolution processes, recognizing that our processes should be accessible, they should be user-friendly, and so wanting to have a process that we can ensure that fairness and that equity exist is going to be important. And then I think I would measure success based on those relationships that I have built with individuals throughout the community and the establishment of a very cohesive team. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. And then Roger, same question.
Well, the ultimate priority of the agency will be able to do the investigations and to monitor and evaluate the investigations that fall under our mandatory and discretionary jurisdiction. But those will be ultimate goals. Within the first 6 months, the priority will be developing the communication capability to let people know who we are and what we do around the city. So the number one priority would be getting 2 community engagement coordinators who can work going around the city into different areas, particularly focusing on the places that have been known to generate higher levels of police complaints than others, to the extent that that data is something that we can obtain. And that leads to the other priority of the first 6 months, which is developing memoranda of understanding with the different agencies that we will be getting information from on a regular basis. So if you can look as a member of the public after the first 6 months, and there are people in your neighborhood who know what OAT is, know exactly what OAT does, know where they can find OAT and where they can make a complaint, and then also know that OAT is going to have access to the information that it needs to from the different agencies that it seeks information from, that is success for us in the first 6 months. And then after that, we can focus on developing the investigative processes in more detail and making sure that we fill out our staff fully to get all the kinds of people we need in the positions where we need them. And we will need effective investigators. We will need an effective research analyst to communicate in our reports, which by the ordinance are due every March 15th. So there will be real expectation, and we want people to have that expectation of receiving information from us and that they can understand that they can come to us for information that they need about our processes as well.
Thank you, Roger. Okay, question number 4. Erin, we'll begin with you. In our current political climate, where thoughts around marginalized people can be polarizing, how will you ensure that you can lead a team that will be effective in times where you don't have the full support from your community, stakeholders, and/or elected officials?
Thank you. So I would certainly say this is where building a cohesive team is imperative. I've certainly worked in environments where this has been the case and have found that when you have a cohesive team, a team where you really take the time to get to know your employees, you take the time to develop them, help them grow, to better help your department and your office grow and develop, is certainly beneficial. It builds that level or that sense of camaraderie, as well as helping individuals to manage the stress or the nature of the work effectively. I've always promoted self-care, recognizing that when you're in these stressful environments, that self-care is critical to employees in terms of how they effectively manage their own personal, mental well-being. Certainly will lead to better outcomes, better performance, higher morale. I would also stress that my leadership philosophy is to lead by example. So by my work ethic, my commitment, my motivation, I think that certainly it can't expect employees to work hard if I'm not working hard. I also like to lead with integrity, doing what is right, being transparent, being honest, ensuring that I'm always engaged, but that also means always holding myself accountable when necessary. And then I like to lead with empathy, showing compassion, treating others the way I would want to be treated, but also recognizing that there are times when you have to address workplace issues. So I've always found that when you build a cohesive team that is very connected, that is well engaged, where you are having team building exercises and trainings collectively, it certainly is beneficial in the nature of this work, and especially when you have opposition throughout the community. I think it would also be effective for a team, for all positions within this particular office, to have some level of community engagement, to really interact with those stakeholders in that community where the differing viewpoints may exist is going to be critical.
Thank you, Erin. Roger, same question.
I would echo the thought about a cohesive team. What I would also do is make sure that the team has realistic expectations of how their work is going to be perceived. There is a presumption of unpopularity when you are making decisions regarding tense issues where there are strong views on all sides. Very rarely are you going to make a decision or express an opinion that is going to be universally popular. So the important thing would be creating a culture where no one expects that. And then once you've done that, you can focus on giving the kinds of fair decisions and rendering the kinds of fair opinions and assessments that you need to. Because the one thing you can guarantee and the one thing that you can do consistently is to have a fair approach that deals with the information responsibly.
Thank you, Roger. Andrew, same question, please.
I would say that as anyone who's worked in police accountability knows, it is, and I'm kind of laughing at what Roger said, but it is a lonely place at times. You're constantly in between, polarized sides. It's hard to really keep anyone happy, but I don't think that's the job. Really when I think about how to weather those storms, and certainly in Seattle, there's been times where, I've had cases that I've had to issue decisions that were not popular, just like I've had cases where people have said, everyone in university says, yes, that's the right decision. But I keep coming back to, again, if you have a mission, a vision, and a value for your office, and if you stand by those and everyone in the office believes in them and you're one team moving forward, everything else is okay. You're always going to get hit with public pressure. You're always going to have public concern. There's always going to be media that's saying one thing or other people on Twitter that are saying another thing. But again, you weather the storm. You do what's right. That's going to be as true in Phoenix as it is in Seattle or as it is in Cleveland, is that you're going to have political pressure and you're going to have times when you have support and you don't have support. But again, it is operating in the same way through all those storms, is being calm, being collected, and as moving your team through as a leader. I think the other thing that's really important, at least for me, and that's kind of gotten me through a lot of these situations, are I really believe in collaboration and relationships. So, for example, there's a whole host of opinions in Seattle about policing and about OPA for that matter. But I meet with everybody and talk to everybody. So even if we don't agree, we still have this common understanding of each other. We still, I might not agree with the union in most situations, but I know them. They know me. I'm not this faceless person in an office. And I think that's really important too, whether it's community, again, whether it's government officials, whether it's the police, is building those relationships, being a real partner, and being willing to work together to move systems through. And I think if you do all those things, you can survive any of the kind of the slings and arrows that just comes with this type of a job.
Thank you, Andrew. All right, moving on to question number 5. Roger, we'll begin with you. Can you give an example of a time where professionally you took a stand, or a time where being truthful or forthright in a professional setting cost you personally?
Well, I feel like to a certain extent that I went through one of those this year. We had a case in our agency that's now been publicly reported. Basically, there was a vehicle pursuit that went into East Cleveland and ultimately resulted in the death of a 13-year-old girl named Tamia Chapman. And this case presented us a series of pitfalls, or a series, I should say, of challenges as an agency. First, our jurisdiction covered this case because we received a complaint, and our organization is entirely complaint-driven. We did receive a complaint in this case, and there wasn't a criminal investigation going on which would have eliminated our jurisdiction. But by the nature of the case, it was pretty easy to tell up front that it wasn't going to be a popular thing if we took on this case and investigated it. So that was the first part that we had to do as an agency, was make a decision what to do in the case. So we decided to investigate it. The next thing was when we began to bring in officers, we were able to see that there were things we were learning that were different than were coming out from their investigation, because we obtained the information from their investigation as well. So we had decisions as to how we were going to handle the information we were receiving, whether we would make that information part of our reporting and part of our decision process, which of course we had to do, and we did. And then the final thing is that in that case, the chief of police and the director of public safety made a public statement announcing their decisions and their opinions as to what would happen with that case before we released our conclusions, which, by the way, because of the nature of the process, they would then subsequently receive those cases. So when they did that, it put public pressure on us to perhaps go along with the decision that they had made in those cases. But we didn't do that as an agency, and it was a decision that we made internally and that I led to go ahead and put forth findings that were different than those that were expressed in the opinions of the chief and the director of public safety. And I think the price that we paid as an agency, and to a certain extent the price that I paid personally, is ongoing.
Thank you, Roger. Andrew, same question, please.
So we received, as I said before, around 20,000 complaints that stem from the protests that occurred in Seattle in the summer of 2020. One of the early cases that happened during the protest was captured at the very tail end on Twitter, on video that was posted on Twitter. And what it showed was a young child that was suffering from the effects of pepper spray. And we received literally thousands of complaints about this case, almost 10,000 complaints about this case, and we initiated an investigation. And what we first did was we looked at the Twitter video, and obviously the Twitter video showed like one moment in time, but what we did was we said, okay, let's isolate all the body-worn video, let's isolate all the other video that shows what occurred. And by piecing that together, and we looked at, there was a line of officers, and there was video from every person on the line, and what we were able to do was to piece together the case. And what we saw was that what happened was that the father of the child and the child advanced towards the line. Protesters started pushing through, and an officer deployed pepper spray at a protester, and it bounced off the protester ducked, it bounced off the shoulder, and it affects the father and the child. So in assessing that case, I'm required, just like the OAT director would be required to do, is to look at it under, like, what is the policy? Like, what policy governs it? And when I look at the policy that governs it is a SPD policy, a Seattle Police policy about pepper spray and the use of pepper spray. And under that policy, from my assessment of the facts, there was not an intentional deployment at the child, right? The deployment was at this other person, and the child was affected because of positioning. And at that point, I had to make a decision, right? Would I decide that because it was the easier route, find that the officer violated policy, impose discipline, because I think that would have been much more of the popular approach in community? Or do I apply the policy as written and make a decision based on the policy? I decided the latter. I decided that it was more important for me, even understanding all the concerns, right? It was more important to me to apply the policy as was written and to make a decision, even if I didn't like it. Even if I thought if I had a perfect world, I would have changed the policy or I would have done something different. I felt that my job was to apply the policy to the actions and to reach a decision. It was certainly not a popular decision. What we ended up doing, and I think we changed our model of approach for these cases, was I met with 9 different reporters for an hour each. And I went through the video. I explained to them what I did and why I did it, and they ran long-form stories about the case. And I think at the very least, people may not have agreed with the findings, but they understood why I reached them. And they understood that, again, the limitations of my job and the fact that I am making decisions based on policy. But it was certainly a difficult decision to make, but one that I felt I had to in my role.
Thank you, Andrew. Aaron, same question, please.
Thank you. So I would say there certainly are a number of investigations that I've handled throughout my career that have resulted in unpopular decisions. Oftentimes from the complainants in those cases. And obviously, as an investigator, you're trained to be impartial and fair and objective, looking at the evidence and the facts and applying that to the elements of the laws and regulations, the policies and processes within an organization. And so, there are times where you have to relay very difficult messages to individuals about the outcomes of the investigations. And very unpopular in the sense that, doesn't necessarily mean the conduct didn't happen, just means there isn't sufficient evidence to support it, and thereby can't render a findings in their favor. I've found that, and obviously, no one likes to be in a position where you're letting people down, so I think that certainly can impact you personally, and that certainly can make the job stressful and a bit daunting at times. But I found that when you are fair and you're objective and you're upfront and you're honest and you're transparent about your processes, people trust you more, and you build that rapport, and you start to gain more and more trust throughout the community by mere virtue of your reputation.
Thank you, Aaron. Okay, question number 6, and this is a 2-part question. Andrew, we will begin with you. How do you intend to serve the community of Phoenix and gain the trust of the community and law enforcement to let them know you have their best interest in mind? What plan or strategies will you implement to ensure you are doing both?
It's a really great question. I mean, I think first and foremost, it's, being honest, transparent, and accountable, right? Having those as values. And, and by honesty, it's telling everyone the same thing, right? It's not telling one group one thing and another group the other thing. Is being honest about what you can and can't do, right? And I think someone else talked about setting expectations. It's really important to say, this is what OAT can do, this is what we can't do. We can fight for the things that we can't do, right? But these are our limitations, and being on the same page. And it's just, it's it's not having artifice, right? It's being kind, authentic, and just yourself with whoever you interact with. I think also transparency is super important. At least in my experience, it's, we want to be open about everything we're doing. Why are we doing it? Why did we reach the decision? In my role, just by ordinance, I write between 300 and 500 cases a year, right? And that some of them are 4 pages, some of them are 34 pages. It's a lot of writing, but at the same time, one thing I think is really important in that writing is to fully explain for a community member, for an officer, for an arbitrator, right? Why did I reach these findings? What is the reason? What am I trying to do with the case? What am I trying to show? What am I trying to teach? What's the behavior I want to change? So again, it's being transparent. It's putting everything online too. Like, I want people to have access to this information. We should have no secrets in police accountability. You should be able to see everything, and that would be my goal. And then it's to be accountable. Again, it's meeting people not once, not twice, but coming back over and over and over again. Not because it's hard. A conversation might be difficult, but still going, even though it's hard, and taking it. And I know in Seattle, I've been in many rooms where it's you just go there to be yelled at because people want someone to direct their frustration at. And I'm okay with being that person and taking that on. I think the way I would build the trust, again, I'm not from Phoenix, and that's just something that's a reality, right? I would have to build those relationships. But it's really meeting anyone, anytime, anywhere. And I can tell you we've had numbers of community meetings with folks in Seattle based on our community engagement specialists and their relationships, and then building those relationships. With officers, I go to roll calls all the time. I do office hours where every quarter I go to a precinct and I'm there from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. so I can meet with all the different watches, so to just answer questions so that they know me, they see me. I'm not a bad guy. I'm a human being just like they are. That has to make difficult decisions, but that's my job. And I think that builds a sense of trust and a sense of belief that a system is just not this kind of ivory tower, but it can work for you, and it's done by humans that are trying to do the right thing every single day. So that's what I would do. That would be my plan.
Thank you, Andrew. Aaron, same question, please.
So I certainly feel it's important and critical in this role to have active community engagement to really build that trust with the community that this position or this office serves. As I mentioned earlier, I think that should be a requirement of all personnel who work in this office, is to have some level of community engagement and community relations, and possibly even having a particular role specifically designed for community relations and working with leaders and organizations. It's important to know the leaders of these organizations. It's important to know who they serve in the communities that they provide services to. It's important to identify other organizations within the community that may not be so actively engaged. I think it's also important to really build or host, create, and develop community events to really bridge that relationship between police and the community. So whether it's a national night out or some other type of function that where the community can come out and actively engage with police officers, I think is going to be important. I think in both cases, with respect to building trust with the community and law enforcement, it's important to be accessible to those groups and to also be responsive. Are they able to reach our offices effectively? Are they able to get a response in a timely manner? That's going to be imperative to the role. I also think it would be a good idea to hold not just community meetings, but also meetings with police personnel as well, to not only establish and build relationships, build rapport and trust, but also to hear from them, to gauge how they're feeling, to utilize emotional intelligence to really see through their lens and their perspective. We may not always agree, but at least we can have an understanding of where each side may come from. And then lastly, I would say having educational opportunities for the community, for the youth of this community, as well as for the police department is going to be very imperative as well. So whether that's the police providing education, this office providing some level of education, or other resources out there utilizing what we have in our toolkit to really reach out to these communities. But it's going to be important to really listen to both sides and to try and see through the lens of those sides. And I think my very mild temperament is a critical component of being able to do that.
Thank you, Erin. Roger, same question.
Well, one of the things that to bridge the gap between police officers and the community through this work is that I think the effort in applying the rules to the facts and in gathering the facts in a responsible way and marshaling and assessing the evidence in a responsible way, it basically becomes a similar act to the one that an umpire might engage in a baseball game. You're calling balls and strikes. You're calling people out and safe. That's going to be producing reactions and responses, and your calls are not going to be popular. But the game would feel incomplete without the umpire. And that's the main point of this exercise, is that the umpire makes the game better. And basically getting people to a place where they can trust the umpire, or in this case, an umpire, is just about making sure that they understand that what you want is not driving what you do, that it's the rules and the policies that have been decided in other quarters that are deciding what you do, and that the question is just a question of application of those rules. Now, umpires make bad calls from time to time. We will make some too. Hopefully, if the process is going right, we will not make too many. But we have to be willing to receive input, feedback, criticism, comment, so that to the extent there's any deficiency in our processes, we will be able to adjust and improve them. Basically, we have to exercise the same accountability and transparency that we're respecting from the community and that we're respecting from the department as well.
Thank you, Roger. Okay, question number 7, Erin, we will begin with you. How will you maintain the integrity of your role, that of the Office of Accountability and Transparency, and its investigations, given the highly political and emotional environment that surrounds civilian review?
So I certainly would say integrity is one of my core values, not just as a military service member, but as an individual from a personal standpoint as well. It certainly is important to be transparent, to be honest, to be forthcoming with information, to give individuals the opportunity to be heard in the platform. To be able to do so is important. It's also important to hold yourself accountable, to hold the office accountable. When we look at our trends, 1 year, 2 years from now, are our processes working? And if not, then let's make changes to improve them and hear back from the community that we serve on what we're doing right and what they think could be improved upon as well. I also think with respect to maintaining integrity, when you can manage or maintain an office that certainly focuses on fairness, quality services, being effective and efficient, that is going to be a critical component of this role as well. I recognize that we certainly are in a political and highly emotional environment right now. It certainly has impacted me as an individual, not just professionally, but personally as well. We certainly have seen a lot happen within the last 18 months, and of course, well before that as well. I think I've been in a position within the military because there has been some distrust within that organization or within the armed forces with respect to how troops were utilized last year. But understanding that I, like all other soldiers, took an oath to support and defend the Constitution of this country, and that includes protecting the individual and fundamental rights of citizens. And that includes those rights enumerated in the Bill of Rights. So freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of protest is all very important. I think it's also important to understand that the military is controlled and commanded by the president holding office, as the commander-in-chief, or in the context of National Guard, they are commanded by the president or the governor of the state, depending on what status they are in. So when the public saw an outpouring, or when the public saw troops activated to sites of protest and civil unrest, we saw internally within the military an outpouring of support for soldiers of color, recognizing the importance of diversity, and also recognizing that the military itself has a long ways to go. And so I'm happy to be part of change within that entity, but also within the civilian side, utilizing both skills within both professions, military and civilian. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Roger?
Well, one of the things, and I guess it's an unfortunate aspect of this work, is that what you want is going to constantly be under assault. And what I mean by that is this. In the course of the community engagement that you do, you're going to be encountering all kinds of people that you sympathize with, that you bond with, you connect with their stories, you connect with their experience. And then you're going to realize that you may not have a remedy for their situation, and that the rules that you're operating under may not allow you the kind of response that you want to give them. So you're going to have that problem. And then you may see it with an officer who you know was just trying to do his job correctly, just trying to do his job responsibly. But by some operation of a rule, the officer is facing discipline. You want to provide that officer another situation because you understand his story too. Doing what you want and grounding what you do in what you want does not work in this area. You have to be prepared to accept that a lot of this job is going to involve not having the opportunity to do what you want, and being prepared to explain that to people who want the same thing. And essentially the two of you will have to be disappointed together. I think that's the key to maintaining integrity, because the minute you start trying to be responsive to what you want, then you'll start interpreting rules in a way that allow it. And you'll start interpreting facts in a way that make things look the way you want them to. So you have to get as much as you can, get what you want out of the process, and get what you really see into it in a bigger way.
Thank you, Roger. Andrew?
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what both Roger and Erin said. I mean, I think certainly in my time in Seattle, two of our core values have been objectivity and independence. And for objectivity, I think it is, to Roger's point, it's you're an objective fact gatherer, and you make decisions based on the facts, based on policy, based on the law. End of story. And then I think when you start to go down a path that's not that, you do start to compromise yourself. So it's really important to be objective, because if you do it once, you're going to do it again. What I would also say is independence, and more, you know, the OPA director role that I'm in is not supposed to be political, but it is political. You're in constantly being in the push and pull of city government. You know, some people on one side would like to defund the police, others want to reform the police, and there's a lot of discussions that are constantly going on in which, you know, OPA is in the front and center. That being said, you know, I think it's really important for us to be independent. Again, you know, I'm not endorsing political positions. I'm not a politician. My job, and I like the analogy that Roger uses, an umpire, right? It's like, you know, looking at the cases and making decisions based on facts and policy and law. And I think that is the way to do it. I think that's the way you ensure independence, you ensure objectivity, and you ensure that you're not sucked into the maelstrom that can be politics.
Thank you, Andrew. And last question, Roger, we'll begin with you. How will you ensure the residents of Phoenix have access to timely information and reports?
Wow, that's a big one. Well, the first thing is making sure that we have access to timely information. And that goes to the memoranda of understanding that we were discussing before. So that's the first thing, securing our access. The next thing is developing an internal communication process that gets the reports to the public in a timely way. And that means being able to accurately assess what it will take to get those reports out on time and to get that information into the public's hands on time. And that means us accurately assessing the volume of information that you have to communicate. And that's basically just going to be about hard and daily and consistent work, because the only way that you can have accurate information about how long things take is you've got to be at the processes all the time. The other thing to do in that regard is to ensure that you're clear always on the things you need to communicate. Because one of the things that creates a lot of unanticipated delay is when you have an inaccurate assessment of how much you need to communicate, and then you either have to add something at a later date, or you have to edit something that you've already been prepared to disclose. So managing those processes, having ways to assess accurately both how long things will take and exactly what information you need to communicate.
Thank you, Roger. Andrew?
So I think public reporting and making information available to the public is probably the most important thing that a oversight agency can do, and more, I think in the last couple of years particularly, that's something that I've learned, and something that our office in Seattle has really innovated in. I mean, first and foremost, I think when we talk about staffing and ramping up the office, you really want to focus on people that have expertise in policy and communications, and also in data analytics. And also, we've had a lot of success at OPA with design folks too. Like, do you know how to create a website? Can you add content to a website? My goal would be virtually immediately, every single policy recommendation that we make is posted online, so people can see what we're doing and why we're doing it. The chief's response to that policy recommendation is also online, so they can see the back and forth between my office and the chief. Case summaries, obviously abiding by law and collective bargaining agreements. I want case summaries to be redacted, but to be public. Again, so people can understand the cases and they understand what occurred and how OAT reached its decision. Data dashboards are really important. Dashboards that show people, here are all the cases that are pending. Right? Here are all the cases with sustained findings. You can sort them by case. You want to see all excessive force cases from the last 2 years? You can do that. Go to this data dashboard. And obviously, the thing that I found is incredibly important over the last year is videos. What I've realized over time is that, when we issue a finding, maybe a 30-page findings memo, people don't have time to read that. And it's not accessible. Like, not all people are lawyers. Not all people want to delve through a 30-page document. But what we can do, and we started to do this in really high-profile cases, was to create 2-minute videos. And in that video, we're saying, okay, this is what happened. This is what we looked at, showing snippets from body-worn videos, showing snippets from evidence. And this is the decision we reached and why, right? And making those public on our YouTube page and transmitting them to community. And that's a big thing that I want to grow. And certainly we're doing it in Seattle, and I want to grow it here too, because you can use it for so many other reasons. You can use it for example, like, meet the director. This is OAT. This is the office. This is what we do and why we do it. You can use it for policy recommendations to say, okay, like, here's a hyper-complex issue around the de-escalation policy. This is what it says right now. This is what we want it to say, and this is why we want it, and here's the impact it would have on you. And that's the disconnect, right? For collective bargaining, this is what it is. This is how you bargain. So I think that there's such a growth area for videos and video for the public, and also for data analytics, and I would really push that and to innovate in that area in Phoenix.
Thank you, Andrew. Erin?
So first and foremost, I think it's important to establish a process by which residents can request reports, ensuring that we are in alignment with public records, laws, and regulations. I think it's also critical to have a comprehensive case management database by which you can gather reporting data efficiently, and understanding that that typically just means numbers, but also having a process by which you are able to identify trends, utilizing researchers, utilizing your staff, to gather where you're seeing the most issues, what type of issues. Are the processes working? Are the investigations, have we built a strong reputation within the organization and within the process by which individuals who are involved in investigations can contribute to by providing feedback? I think it's also important to have, in terms of delivering information, to host community meetings or possibly even a community newsletter where we are identifying what we're doing and how it's working and what we plan to do moving forward. I think that will be certainly critical in terms of relaying information to the residents and the community. And I think it's also imperative that we have an effective communication line for that, by which residents can easily access the office to make these complaints, to file requests for reports, to just vent if they need to. So having possibly a community relations person or someone who can manage that aspect of it, I think, is certainly going to be very important in terms of how to get these reports out to, and information itself out to individuals requesting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Okay, so this concludes the Q&A portion of the forum tonight. At this time, I'd like to give each of our finalists an opportunity to provide a brief closing statement, and Andrew, we'll begin with you.
Well, first, again, thank you for the opportunity to interview for this position, to take these community questions. I said this at the opening, it's such an exciting opportunity for the city. And I think you have two really qualified people on this panel next to me right here, and I think the city's in good hands. I think Phoenix should be excited for the opportunity that's ahead. Police oversight is hard. It's a slog. It's unforgiving, and sometimes you can never make anyone happy. But I think you've started this process, and I think it's gonna be a great organization and a great system. And I would love the opportunity to lead it into the future. So thank you.
Thank you, Erin.
As he mentioned, yes, thank you everyone for tuning in tonight and giving us this opportunity to share with you our backgrounds and how we would respond in certain situations. I certainly see this as an opportunity to be a part of meaningful change within a community where I have lived for the past 7 years. Certainly have seen the number of issues that have occurred within this community and the need for things to improve. I certainly feel my investigative background makes me a good fit for this position. My analytical skills, my writing skills, my passion for social justice and for improving and advancing initiatives as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion are critical. The government aspect of this entity would also permit me to get back to true government work. I certainly have worked in government municipalities for a number of years, and certainly have found it to be a place where I thrive and certainly can work effectively and make change. I think with respect to social justice and my passion for it, raising awareness of inequalities and inequities within our society is going to be critical, and how power, privilege, and oppression impact our society is also a critical component, I believe, of this director position. And recognizing that although we may have laws that are facially neutral, sometimes they are applied inconsistently, and oftentimes that could be based on bias. So again, I certainly see this as an opportunity to be a part of the solution, recognizing that particularly the past 18 months have been very challenging for our country, and before that as well. But to really impact change and move our society forward, I think this is certainly going to be something that I would want to be involved in. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Roger?
I want to join Erin and Andrew in thanking the people of Phoenix for giving us this opportunity to be on this stage and to talk to you about the opportunity to be the director of OAT. But I also want to thank you for putting Phoenix on the civilian oversight map. That only came because you stayed with the idea. And now there's an opportunity to turn that idea into a meaningful, exemplary organization for other communities that would do the same thing, because there are still many cities out there that have not done what you've done at this point. And I think importantly, effective leadership at OAT is the beginning of that process. It's a way to get civilian oversight into a permanent place in this city. And I think you have 3 candidates here who can all bring that to you. But either way, it's a conversation that has been begun by you, you've persevered, and now that conversation can turn into meaningful action, meaningful investigation, meaningful gathering of facts, and meaningful contributions to the development of all investigations citywide. And I hope to be a part of that, but I will definitely follow it, whatever happens.
Thank you, Roger. All right, with that, this concludes our forum. Next steps, the finalists will be participating in a panel interview with leadership from the city manager's office before a final decision is made on the director position. On behalf of the City of Phoenix, I'd like to thank you all for joining us from your homes. And to our finalists, thank you all for your interest in this opportunity with the City of Phoenix. And we wish you all the very best of luck as you continue in the interview process. Have a good night, everyone.
Gem in Phoenix that if you're cleaning out your house or your shed, your garage, they may just take it. And it's all about trading what you have for some cool goods, and maybe you do a purchase or two. It's like a little consignment, and it's a really cool place. And actually, they take some albums there too.
Right, you can hang out there, you can read, you can do a lot there. Right. Check it out.